Alright everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and compare the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra and see which specific phone is the better one for you. Now, if you want to pick up either one of these phones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, as of right now, the S22 Ultra is a little bit of a more expensive phone in the brand new market, but it is a cheaper phone pretty much everywhere else in the used market. So if you wanted to go and buy those things on eBay, even on Amazon, you may be able to get them for cheaper overall than you would be able to find a iPhone 14 Pro Max because those have just came out. But retail value, the S22 Ultra was a more expensive phone. You have to keep that in mind. On the outside, the Galaxy S22 Ultra has a 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display, and it was a 1440p panel, and it was one of its best assets for sure. I mean, this specific screen was beautiful. It's still going to look beautiful, and looking for the next 5-10 years, this specific screen is going to look timeless. I mean, there's really not too much a lot of other manufacturers can do that they can top this specific panel. I mean, it's like top tier for sure. Now we have a whole bunch to display, which is great. We have a curved panel, which looks nice. We have flat edges on the top and bottom. So it gives this impression that it reminds me of like a flat edge TV in a way, that it's like curved on the side and it's like flat on top. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. 120 Hz panel here too. And overall, I think it's a really good looking screen. On the iPhone 14 Pro Max, on the other hand, we have a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED panel, and it's also a really good display. You know, the S22 Ultra is overall a bigger phone. The 14 Pro Max is just a little bit smaller, but it seems like it's a thicker phone to me. The 14 Pro Max panel, it doesn't have a whole bunch display. It has something called a dynamic island. Now this dynamic island, it covers up like 5 times more space than a whole would, but it's supposed to bring some sort of feature ability with it. So far it's been okay. I mean, it hasn't really been a life-changing feature that Apple was kind of showcasing it, and I think within a few years I think it's probably going to be something not many people are going to be using, very similar to something like a touch bar on the MacBooks. So it's going to be one of those things I think Apple's going to bring, and they're probably going to fizzle out very soon. But the panel of the 14 Pro Max is still great. You still have a 120 Hz panel there, and overall that specific screen still looks good as well. Now on the bottom, you have Lightning port on the bottom of the 14 Pro Max, USB-C on the bottom of the Galaxy S22 Ultra, and on the back, we have frosted glass backs on both, which look beautiful. I've said this for so many years now, having some sort of frosted glass back future-proofs your device like crazy. If you have, a frosted glass back, then you compare it to like a standard glass back that's on like an iPhone 14, those are some really big differences. And personally, I love having that type of capability. So when it comes down to it, having that type of back on these type of phones future-proofs both these phones like crazy. Now we have a triple camera setup on the 14 Pro Max. We kind of have like a quadruple camera setup on the S22 Ultra. We'll get into that in a second. But some other things I want to point out, both these phones have IP certification, but the Galaxy S22 Ultra has 2 features, actually 3 features, that kind of make it seem more of like a flagship, more of like a deal in my opinion. The one is the S Pen. The S Pen, which acts almost like a stylus, is a really cool thing, and that was something that I was really happy about when they implemented these things back in not too long ago, and this phone has it built within it, which is so awesome. This phone also has Samsung DeX built within this phone too, which basically allows us to connect this phone to another monitor of some sort, and we can go ahead and use this phone as a desktop-like experience on that monitor, which again, in and of itself is amazing. So we don't really get that type of capability on a lot of other phones. We have that on this phone, but on top of that, this is the craziest thing. We have reverse wireless charging on this phone too. Now reverse wireless charging is not new. It's been here since like the Galaxy S10, even before that with other phones. This phone has it here too. Apple doesn't have any of those features on that phone. So in some ways, yeah, the iPhone kind of seems like a lackluster phone. It's not a lackluster phone, but it's starting to kind of showcase how Samsung for years now has kind of been ramping up their feature ability of these phones. And at least if they're selling a phone that's like this expensive, at least it kind of has a lot more features for it, rather than an iPhone 14 Pro Max, which doesn't even have that many more features than an iPhone 12 Pro Max, if we're being honest. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the camera setup, like I mentioned before, the triple camera setup on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, we had a 48 megapixel wide-angle lens, 12 megapixel telephoto lens, 12 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, and a LiDAR sensor as well. Where on the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, we had a 108 megapixel wide-angle lens, 10 megapixel telephoto lens, another 10 megapixel telephoto lens, then a 12 megapixel ultra-wide sensor. Now on the front, we can do 4K at 60 on both, which is great, and on the back, we can do 4K at 60 on the back of both these, but we can do 8K on the back of the S22 Ultra, which again is really awesome. Now on the iPhone side, I personally like these cameras. I think they bring a lot of stuff to the table. I think they have very good quality when it comes down to those applications like Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, some of the main applications I use, and this phone basically uses those specific things, which is really cool. I think for, day-to-day tasks and everyday type of people who don't want to mess around with too many settings or whatever, I think an iPhone camera is very consistent. You get very consistent photos, very good, great looking photos, but without tinkering too much, you're not really going to be, getting the same quality photos, I would say, that you might be getting on a Samsung phone. Now, the reason I say that is, for one, you have 8K capability, which is amazing. So if you're videotaping that specific level of quality, well, that is very cool. But also, you have a ton amount of features built within the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra camera. It is not even funny. There are so many features built within that phone. It can last you for so many years just based off those features. I mean, there's pro modes, there's just so many things within that specific phone that honestly, I think the quality could be going for each one, but the feature-wise and pretty much the sensors and everything, I think they may end up going for something like the S22 Ultra when it comes down to it. So in terms of that kind of covers it up in the camera comparison. Now in the software longevity, I think the iPhone 14 Pro Max is going to win, but I think the S22 Ultra is pretty much going to come close when it comes down to it. In the performance side, the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset inside with 12 gigs of RAM on all the models. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has that Apple A16 Bionic chip inside of it with 6 gigs of RAM on each model. Now, personally, I think the S22 Ultra, tremendous performing phone. Everything I threw at it was perfect. There were some complaints though from tons of people actually that, maybe the S22 Ultra wasn't, optimized with the best chipset of that time. I personally had a great time with it. I didn't really experience too many problems, but I did hear a lot of people mentioning that maybe the performance was good, but the battery life to performance ratio wasn't that great. And that is something that has always been pretty good on iPhones. With every single A series chipset for the most part, Apple has optimized those chipsets so well to the T that pretty much any time there's any issues, Apple will go ahead and make sure that the performance you're getting from that chipset isn't really going to go ahead and throttle that specific performance of that specific, chipset, whether it's on a MacBook or if it's on an iPhone. So I think with the S22 Ultra, very good performing phone, still little glitches from Samsung's UIs here and there and just random Android glitches that we all kind of know about. So I think the iPhone still may be a smoother phone. It may be like a fast phone too, but I don't know, I don't know which one would be the faster one here. I think both of them have been fast for me, and I don't think I would go from one phone or the other just because of the speed of one phone or the other. Like, I think both these phones are very fast. I think both these phones have a ton of capability, and I don't think I would really go from one or the other just based off the performance. But I would say the speed would probably go for both, but the smoothness would be added for the iPhone 14 Pro Max because the smoothness within just iOS, but the bugs within iOS 16 is kind of hurting that specific phone, but the bugs within the, Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 is also kind of hurting the S22 Ultra. So it's kind of weird how it's going back and forth. Now, I've also found battery life to kind of be better on the S22 Ultra overall. That phone had a 5,000 mAh battery versus the 4323 mAh battery on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And again, we're getting things like the reverse wireless charging, which is like a flagship feature where we're missing that on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And to kind of sum it up, I definitely do think when it comes down to it, the S22 Ultra, it still screams to me that that's more of a flagship phone, or the idea of a, Ultra phone is more of a flagship than what Apple's kind of providing with their Pro Max series. There's been rumors that Apple's making an Ultra lineup or something. I hope they do. But as of right now, I think the Ultra kind of screams to me that that is more of a flagship. If we're not comparing Android to iOS, that's kind of how I feel. But I still think the 14 Pro Max is still a very, very good phone. I mean, that thing it just came out. This thing still has a beautiful display, great performance, great cameras, great battery life, has a humongous future ahead of it, and maybe you can even pick one up in the used market in a few years for a few $100s, and that would be an exceptional deal. So in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.